So we're dealing with multiplication and division now, and how you solve equations using multiplication and division. So let's look at it. There's a couple of important things to know. The division property of equality. That means dividing each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. What that just means is that if you divide this, by 4, you're still going to end up with the same thing, because both this side, if you divide by 4, and this side, if you divide by 4, if they were equal before, then they will be equal afterwards. So what's happening here is you're doing 4 times x is equal to 28. But you don't want 4 times x. You just want x. So what you're going to do is you're going to divide by the coefficient. The coefficient in this case is 4. And when you do that, you've got to do that on the other side as well, because 4 divided by 4 cancels out to being 1. And so then you're just left with x is equal to 28 divided by 4, which is just 7. So in a lot of ways, that's very similar to what we did before with addition and subtraction. If you have this here, then you're going to subtract 1 from each side, and you end up with a is equal to -3. Or if you have a minus 1 is equal to -3, then you're going to add 1 to both sides. And when you do that, you end up with a is equal to -2. So that's it's very similar to that. It's the inverse operation. It's the opposite operation. And the same thing we're doing with division is the same sort of idea is happening when you're solving things with multiplication. In this case here, what you have is the multiplication property of equality. Multiplying each side of an equation by the same non-zero number produces an equivalent equation. So again, in this case here, what you have is x divided by 8 is equal to 5. You're not looking for x divided by 8. You're looking for x. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply each side by, in this case here, the thing that is the number is being divided by, which is 8. And when you do that, what happens is you end up with 8 over 8 times x. So basically what you're doing is this cancels out into 1. And that's what you're trying to do. But that's now going to be equal to 5 times 8, because I've just multiplied the whole thing, both sides of the equation, by 8. So x is then going to be equal to 40. So similar sort of idea. In this example here, we've got the operation is division that starts off the problem. So when the operation is division, you do the opposite operation, the inverse operation, and that's multiplication. And then over here in the top one, when you do the opposite operation, you're starting off with multiplication, so the inverse operation is division. So for this one here, we got 12 times w is equal to negative 96. We're not looking for 12w. We're looking for just 1w. So we're going to divide both sides by 12. And when we do that, what we end up with is w is going to be equal to 96 divided by 12, or negative 96 divided by 12, and that's going to be equal to -8. And again, one way to make sure that this is right, plug this number back in here, where the w is. -8 times 12, that's equal to -96. So you got your answer right there. For this one here, what you have is a divided by 12 is equal to 11. Remember, the fraction symbol just means a divided by 12. So in this case here, you're going to multiply both sides by 12. And then when you multiply both sides by 12, what ends up happening is you end up, this cancels out with this. And then you're left with a is equal to 11 times 12, which is just going to be equal to 132. So what we have is a couple word problems. Sam bicycled at an average speed of 4 miles per hour to get to a store. That was 1 mile from home. How long did it take him to reach the store? Okay, so he's going 4 miles per hour. So 4 miles per hour. So 4 miles per h, let's say h for hours, is equal to 1. Because he's going 4 miles for every 1 hour. So 4 miles per hour, 4 times h is equal to 1. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And when we do that, we're going to end up with h is equal to 1/4 of an hour. And that makes sense, because if you plug that back in, one more time here, you got to plug this back in here. When you do that, you end up with 4 times 1/4 is equal to 1, which makes perfect sense. Which property would you use to solve the equation? X divided by 2 is equal to 10. How is the property used to find the solution? And then explain that. So what you would do is you'd use the multiplication property of equality. So here, when you multiply both sides by 2, just remember, this whole statement means x divided by 2. When you multiply both sides by 2, you end up with 2 over 2 times x is equal to 10 times 2. So this cancels out. So it's now equal to 20. And that's your answer. In terms of how the property is used, well, basically you're just multiplying by the same thing. You're multiplying by 2 on both sides, and that's allowing you to isolate this variable. When I say isolate the variable, all I mean by isolate the variable is that if I have an x here, that everything else, it doesn't matter what is on this side. If I've isolated the variable that I'm looking for, actually for y it doesn't really matter, but that may not be the case. But if I've isolated a variable, everything else that's on the right-hand side of the equation, that doesn't involve an x. In this case here, the only x is right there. So that's basically where we're going in terms of solving equations through multiplication and division.